This is really cool because we got Meow here, and Meow, you're awesome because you're a biohacker, right? And this is the third biohacker I've had on this show. Hey, Meow, what is biohacking?
So for me, biohacking is this kind of umbrella term that encompasses a whole heap of different things. So I think it's molecular biology, microbiology, bioinformatics, building your own equipment, and putting electronics and technology inside your body. And it's these things being done outside of a traditional institution. So if you're doing it at university, it wouldn't be considered biohacking, but if you're doing it in your garage or your lounge room, it would be considered biohacking.
All right, that's really cool. And you are the third one, as I said. So I've had Zoltan Itzvan on before, and he is famous because he's got a chip in his arm. He got a chip installed in, I think, 2016 or 2015, 2016, and he can do multiple things from unlocking doors, sending emails, a whole bunch of funny things with that chip, and that was pretty cool. We brushed over that because we were racing through his biography, and I would like to expand with him more on that. You have done something similar, but the other person I've done an interview with, which I lost the audio for, and it's not out there in the public sphere, is Tim Cannon. And Tim Cannon's famous because he went to Germany, and he had this huge computer in his arm and all this sort of stuff. I mean, the biohacking community, that's pretty intense. What's your story, Meow? What got you involved with this industry, this phase of almost libertarian type thinking in the enhancement world?
Yeah, so I started the biohacking movement in Australia. It must have been like 8 years ago now or something, mainly with a focus on molecular and microbiology. That culminated in us getting a laboratory that was an open access molecular biology laboratory where anyone from the community could come and make a genetically modified organism and do molecular sciences without having the gate of $100,000 or $200,000 to stop them. We call it democratizing science. So it enabled the general public to get access to something that only academics would generally get access to. I can go on and on about why that's important. Please give me 1 second.
That's all right. So yeah, so he's just getting the door. We knew this interruption would come, but it's an extremely exciting endeavor because in the future we're going to become more integrated with our components, with our parts. Okay, so the Internet of Things is coming down the pipeline. The advancement of technology is going to become such that there will be more and more integration between our human components of who we are and our digital components. So so I was just filibustering, saying how that in the future there will be more integration between us and the machines. But continue.
So I'm so sorry.
You're right. So that's okay. So that's what's going to happen in the future. I mean, there's going to be more integration on the whole, right? So that's why we're having Meow on, because Meow is at the forefront of this evolutionary process in humanity. At the same time as humans. As humans and technology merge ever more. I mean, you're probably watching this on a mobile phone, or you're probably watching this on a monitor or something like that. So this is what Meow is super important in this context. So Meow, you're back. Continue telling us about this laboratory.
Okay, so basically we set up this open access laboratory in the same fashion that some people in America had set up similar ones before, most notably being GenSpace in New York and BioCurious in just south of San Francisco. And this kind of led me to doing more and more in we were creating what biohacking is. We were trying to, as a group of people around the world, not separated by governments or borders, imagining together what we could do as individuals. So what we ended up doing was creating this lab. We moved it a few times, and now it's got a kind of permanent home right near the CBD of Sydney. Now, this lab's used every single day by different people. Most of them are wanting to start businesses. Some people are just wanting to explore their own interest in molecular biology. And through this process, I sat down and started to shape out like what are the actual core components of what biohacking is, because all these people are calling themselves biohackers. You know, there's people taking medications, there's people putting implants inside their body, there's people making GMOs in their garage, and I tried to work out what that'll look like. And my definition is a little bit different than some other people's. Some people don't include grinding, for example, putting technology in your body. I do. Some people include kind of exercise and stuff like this as part of what they consider to be biohacking. I don't really consider that biohacking. Like broadly, yeah, I guess it is, but it's not sexy, so it doesn't fit under that banner. And anyway, through creating that, I kind of got interested in implants because I was like, no, this is the future. This is transhumanism. This is cyborg stuff. But at first I thought microchips were a bit dumb, and I ended up getting one and was blown away by how much fun it was, how cool it was. And so I started with a little one in my thumb. And then from that, I ended up getting like heaps of press because I started talking to people about, could we use this as a form of payment? I did an interview with one of my students. So he was a media student, and he had to, for his final assignment, he had to like cut together like a fake news segment. And we cut together one about doing payments on a Commonwealth Bank terminal using NFC. And I put up my Facebook page, and it ended up getting picked up by some national broadcasters in Sydney, and they wanted to run with this and talk about it. So that was before I had like my other 2 implants. So it's been a really fun journey, and it's something that is a very easy way to engage with people about the core tenets of transhumanism. You know, why is it that if someone gets a cochlear implant, it doesn't make the news? But if I get something that does basically nothing, like realistically, that make the news.
Yeah. This is a very important fact. Yeah, cochlear implants, pacemakers. I mean, artificial joints and stuff. I mean, these don't get national press. No one's running around thumping their Bible saying that these are part of the 666, conspiracy. So yeah, so something as harmless as a chip. And I think it comes down to, you want to be in control of you're talking about grinding, right? You want to be in control of what you do to your body, but at the same time, there's this notion that what if these components are hacked? What if the government forcibly implants people with these things? So it goes from being a libertarian stance to a authoritarian stance, and I think this is what people are worried about ethically, right?
Yeah, and so also to tie it in, I had as we're aware, I had a travel chip, a government travel chip implanted on the back of my hand. So Amal Grafstra, who runs Dangerous Things, took an Opal card, which is our transport card, and removed the wrapper and took the little chip out and encased that in biocompatible plastic and put that and sent it to me, and I got it put in the back of my hand by Joltron from Stoneheart. And that made international press because the government
that's
shut
huge.
it down. Yeah, so the government shut it down, which is it's authoritarian, but it also has issues around bodily sovereignty. Like, what right does the government have to shut down a piece of technology once it's inside my body? Like, it's the thin end of the wedge, but what about if that was a cochlear implant or a pacemaker or something like that? Like, where do their rights start and where do their rights stop? Do we grant that to governments and do we grant that to companies? Because we're going to see people with cochlear implants get them shut down. I'm almost sure of it. The reason for this is that cochlear implants can actually hear outside the range of human hearing. And a lot of the people who have them want to expand their hearing to be able to utilize the full potential of the implant. But that goes against the terms of service of Cochlear, but there's no reason why Cochlear has any right to do that. Now, the reason I think they've done it is that people get pissed off. People are okay, when you remove disability. But once you become transhuman and increase the ability above an ordinary person, everyone gets upset. And that's why my chip flips people out, but people with cochlear implants are fine. We're going to see a time in the next 10 or 20 years when the Paralympians are going to outstrip regular Olympians' records. And it's at that time we're going to have very uncomfortable conversations around augmentation, because it's going to happen whether people like it or not. Just because technology is proceeding in a certain direction. Cochlear chose to restrict the hearing because they know that this is a problem. Now, if somebody chose to break that firmware and put their own firmware on, and Cochlear found out, they could actually give that person back their disability. And it wouldn't be a legal issue the same way as switching off someone's pacemaker and killing them. And that's why I think this is like the breaking point. I could be completely fucking wrong, but we'll see. I think it's the one where we're going to do it. But it is interesting because people are talking about this. When my court case came up, my friend was in line at the post office, and they said 2 people in front of her, the mum asked the kid what they did at school today, and the kid was 10 years old and said to the mum, we talked about the ethics around the Opal card in Meow's hand. And I'm like, I've never met this fucking kid. You know, this is some kid at a primary school in Sydney talking about transhumanist ethics and principles. And it's important that we as biohackers and transhumanists actively engage with the public, talking about these issues so that we can make sensible decisions and policy long before it ever becomes a problem. You know, we live in New South Wales, or I live in New South Wales. It's a state of knee-jerk policy. You know, one person gets hit in the head, they shut down the entire nightlife of a fucking state. And it's bad things come from knee-jerk policy. Good things come from people talking about policy for 4 years before it's a problem and making good laws accordingly.
Yeah, and you know, it kind of makes me really think about who owns that Opal card. I mean, when you purchase it from the government and you get it, I mean, are they still saying that that's still property of them? I mean, it's different from renting a service. Like, if you have a bin company, like you give the bins to some sort of retail outlet or whatever, and you come and you collect the bin and you still own that bin. That's not the bin is not property of them. I mean, but this really makes you think about the Opal card. You purchase that, but the government is saying actually that's still part of our property, and you can't do what you want to with that piece of property. So then it kind of takes that out to a whole range of technologies, to a whole range of thinking. Where does private property start? Where do terms and conditions start? And it's a whole ethos, a whole ecosphere of issues and minefields there, right?
And if we want to see how draconian these laws are, so basically what happens is the way that laws get created is that some lawyers from the Transport Company, which is a state-owned institution, Transport New South Wales, this government-owned branch, write a set of rules that they think are fair, and then they get gazetted and actually turned into law, which I'm just like, this is insane. Their terms and conditions become law. They own the card. If I died tomorrow, Transport New South Wales or the government would effectively own my body because they still own the chip. They would have more rights over my body than my wishes as an alive individual, because once I die, I cease ownership of my body, even with a legal will and stuff like that, which I find bizarre. You know, they could dig me up out of the ground and like, you know, take possession of at least the chip, but quite possibly my body, which I find completely batshit insane.
Yeah, that's nuts, and it really makes you think about bodily sovereignty and all these other issues. When you're talking about this sort of stuff, you're talking about molecular biology. For you, how important is morphological freedom? Is it very important? Not very important? What's the state of morphological freedom over there?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one, man. Especially in Australia. Like I'm. You know, I've been invited to speak at government conferences on gene technology regulation in Australia because we've done something very unusual. No one before us had done what we've done. Normally, changing things at a genetic level is only ever done by universities or large companies. So we navigated the legislation very smoothly. We worked closely with government, which has actually worked out really well for us. And I know that a lot of biohackers in America don't share that same kind of opinion. And a big part of that is America is founded on libertarianism, and Australia kind of isn't. You know, we're not even a fucking republic for Christ's sake. Like, so we don't have a Bill of Rights because we've never been oppressed aside from Indigenous Australians. We've never fought in any wars where our sovereignty was challenged. So we basically have just kind of skated through on what we've been given, and that's kind of been good enough. It's why Australians don't push for a republic either. What do I think about morphological freedom in that context? We spoke with the government and said, like, you know, if we were to go and modify our genetics, under the legislation in Australia, we technically would never be able to leave the laboratory. And the government kind of said they wouldn't really enforce that. But also they would kind of be like, can you not do it? It's a very kind of like Australian way of dealing with things. They're like, you know,
yeah, nah.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So what do I think about morphological freedom, though? I think that it kind of comes down to some basic tenets. So one of them kind of is, you know, that basic thing of you should have kind of the right to do whatever you want as long as it doesn't impact on the freedom of anyone else to do exactly what they want. Now let's have a look at this from the perspective of the most basic morphological freedom. We'll say vaccines. Not vaccinating yourself actually puts other people at risk.
Yeah.
So I have immunocompromised friends that are going to die before they're 30 from cystic fibrosis, and like not getting your flu shot impacts their ability to go about their life. It actually can kill them.
Yep.
And there's nothing they can do about it. Them just being in the same physical space as you risks their health. So I think that there should be morphological freedom to a limit. I don't think anyone should stop anyone else from having tails, making CRISPR babies. I think that we're going to see CRISPR and associated technologies like adeno-associated viruses emerge as a real force for good. I think we're going to see it emerge as a force to shape the human race in a certain direction that no one can stop, whether they like it or not. You know, China, for example, has been running human breeding programs for 30 plus years. Not with CRISPR or anything like that, just by getting people that they want to breed and putting them together and asking them to basically have babies.
That giant basketball player is one example of that.
Exactly right. And how is that any different than CRISPRing a baby and doing it really specifically? I don't see there to be any difference. I actually see it being more responsible to use the latest technology rather than spin the wheel of fortune and see what comes out.
Yeah. No, this is a really important point, and I agree. I think it's pretty unethical to breed stock, like human stock, being like you and you. But when it's gene editing, it's you know, you have an assumption built into what will happen, and the scientific proof and assumptions and ethics that are more guided rather than forcing two people into a bedroom and being like, yeah. But I totally agree with that. It's a bit hard, and it's a bit hard too. You know, talking about gene editing and genetics and all these other things, because there's such a stigma, and it's a hangover from World War II. It becomes a really quite taboo topic in normal life. You know, I talked to Zoltan Itzvan about this specifically, about the ethics of talking about gene editing and CRISPR. And you know, and people, you know, the left or the right, or I don't know who it is anymore, but a bunch of people, they say, oh, you're talking about those genes, you're either Hitler reincarnated, or you're an anti-God hating, anti-God hater from New York or whatever. So, you know, so how do you go about, you know, sort of saying that these are okay to talk about, that these topics are actually not, it's not to do with racism, it's not to do with superiority, it's about freedom and individuality, it's about protecting the community, it's about enhancing ourselves, it's about preparing ourselves for the coming technological revolution and changes that are on the horizon. How do you go about framing the argument so you're not some Hitler reincarnate?
I think I'm lucky because people just like assume I already am, so anything less than that is good. I think as well, like I talk a bit about, like, you know, how would you make, you know, racial-based bioweapons and stuff like this, and talk about it from a black hat perspective. So kind of start with like just the fucking worst thing you can possibly do, and talk to people about this and say this is what we have the potential to do, and then maybe starting there is a good point, because past that you say, well, what's the good we could do? So people can kind of see both sides of it. And I think it's important not to forget that bad things can be done, and that needs to be addressed. You know, eugenics hasn't been done well in the past, and it may never be done well under the umbrella term eugenics for the future. But eugenics, the word actually means good genetics, right? And we have the power right now to remove cystic fibrosis from the population. A horrible disease that kills people before they're 30, used to kill babies a lot younger. We can just make these babies have a good quality of life. And I think that it's one of those things where if you start by removing disability, nobody gets too upset. Once you start doing things like selecting for, genes associated with intelligence, genes associated with height, which has been proven to give you a better quality of life as a male, things that might give you perfect pitch, these types of things, some people can get quite upset about it. But I think that people should be able to kind of choose for themselves what they want, and if that makes them happy, that's good. Like, how is me getting a different hair color genetically any different than getting plastic surgery or something like that? And I think showing people how transhuman they already are is kind of a way of bringing them closer to understanding why we might want a little bit more.
Yeah, so an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, and that's kind of the idea. And I like this notion of educating the public on how transhuman they already are, because modern society, if it got hit by any external object that interfered with the electricity supply, modern society collapses in a big heap. I mean, most people don't survive that transition back to a electricity society, and they bumble along. And there's a lot of people who think they're Luddite type people, but really they're the most integrated types. They're just really big talkers, and they're really loud on the internet saying, "I'll never merge with technology. I'll never." But these are people are literally on Facebook, on Twitter, with their phones, interconnected, watching TV, playing VR games, arguing how unconnected they are. And really, all you got to do is say, "Hey, wake up! Hello."
Well, their brains are so outsourced to the internet already. There's some of the most transhuman people. The more time people spend on the internet, the more of their brain they outsource to the internet as well. Like, I don't bother memorizing any fact that I can look up in 2 seconds on my phone. There is literally no point for me to do it. And that means I've already outsourced so much of my brain. I already have this exo consciousness that exists out there, which is information I don't need to store in my brain because I know it's there. My life is in the cloud, and some of those, and these people who are like anti-technologist campaigners on Facebook are probably doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Huge amounts of navigation. Definitely, this is something that almost everybody universally, navigation has been absolutely outsourced. Hardly anyone reads a map anymore. And mathematics on the whole is almost completely being outsourced. And really, a lot of the groundwork mathematics, we're just waiting for quantum computers to do actually the higher forms of math. But yeah, mathematics is something that's also been outsourced massively. And so
and what's interesting on that as well, just to further the point a little bit, is that when we take technology and put it inside our bodies, and specifically things like microchips or computers, it actually makes us more human, because it disconnects you from the screen and from the internet and brings it inside your body, so you're freer to live a more normal life. By me putting my chip inside my hand, I actually remove me consciously interacting with technology. So I just walk onto a train as if it was, 100 years ago. So I think the Luddites should actually jump on to the most high technology to remove technology from their life, in a sense. Like, what if I dream of the day that a microchip or a few microchips can have everything inside my wallet, and I would never have to worry about whether I have my wallet or my Opal card or
your keys.
My keys or anything like this, right? I can just be a human that exists in the world, a world filled with technology, but I don't have to consciously pack technology around me and have all of this like mental burden and stress about, oh, did I pack this? Have I got the right key? Am I paying with the right card or whatever? That the technology around me would have zero user interface and it would just know.
ubiquitous everywhere but nowhere, just like electricity. That's really interesting. In the last few minutes that we have, would you like to talk to any more about this, or I want to ask you a few more different questions from Peter Zing, actually?
Oh yeah, man. Both are good.
All right, so biohacking is really interesting. Hopefully, we can have you one day on to expand on it. Hopefully we can get you on with Zoltan or get you on with somebody else. But Peter Zing asks, what's going on with your projects? You got a whole bunch of projects, and he wants to know an update on your projects.
Yeah, the main project I'm working at the moment is around carbon sequestration. So what we're trying to do is pull carbon out of the atmosphere. Now, most people think that if we just get rid of the coal power plants, we're going to be okay. I don't think that that's the case, and I don't think we're even going to get rid of coal. So I was trying to think, what's the best way I can attack this problem? And I'm a biologist, so a geneticist. So I always look to biology as my solution. And one of my friends who's involved in my company now told me about a plant called azolla. And azolla is a type of duckweed. It grows on ponds. And this thing is really good at pulling carbon down out of the atmosphere. There may be nothing better than it. So we're trying to grow it in a scalable way to offset global carbon emissions and end global warming.
These types of weeds. I remember we've been talking about the Murray-Darling crisis for a while now, and there's a lot of mismanagement there. But one of the things is farmers went from a strategy of ripping out weeds to subsidizing to planting weeds because they realized that the weeds had root systems that pulled water out from the lower levels, and that they helped maintain a healthy soil nutrient level and brought water to the surface and held water there. And when they got rid of a lot of these weeds, they had prolonged droughts, and there was more. There was an incentive to take all the weeds out, and now there's an incentive to put all the weeds back in. So hopefully because weeds are a huge beneficial part of society, so hopefully we can flip the side and have maybe some azolla weeds that helps not only pull carbon out of the atmosphere, but also, assists with, keeping the soil primed for agricultural use.
Definitely. And the interesting thing about azolla, the thing that really got me interested in it, is that 49 million years ago, at the end of the Eocene, this plant caused an ice age. So right now we have about 427 parts per million carbon dioxide, and we need to get it below 400, right?
Yeah.
During the Eocene, it was 800 parts per million. And in 800,000 years, this thing pulled 80% of the carbon out of the atmosphere until it plunged the world into an ice age. And I'm like, that sounds like what we need right about now.
David Yulishvili, he actually came on, and we actually went through his whole project about carbon sequestration, and he mentioned the 400,000 parts per million as well, and how we were well over that threshold, and some of his ideas. So I'll put you on to David, and he's really interesting to come on. Actually, we're going to have a climate change debate. Maybe you should come on that one.
I would love to be involved. And I think one of the problems is a lot of people look to traditional technology to solve a lot of our problems. And I think one of the things that's interesting about bio is that everyone seems to skip over it as if it's not really a technology. But this is a technology that's been self-directed for 4.1 billion years.
Yeah.
And it's really good at doing certain jobs. And one of those jobs is changing the atmosphere. In fact, plants have changed the atmosphere on a number of occasions. Like, we used to have only carbon dioxide in the atmosphere until the first photosynthetic organisms came about, and they changed it into an oxygen-rich atmosphere. And we wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for those microbes manipulating the atmosphere at a global scale. So when I look at global problems, I'm often looking at things like, microbes or plants to be able to actually tackle them, because I'm not smarter than nature.
I like that. It's a really good point to end on, because biology is a technology, and the point of transhumanism, the Huxley family sort of said that we're reaching the outer limits of natural evolution, naturally directed biotechnology, and now it's for us to assume the next step of evolution. We're only at the beginning of that transition, but we have to actually now direct it. We have to take charge. It doesn't matter the fact that we took, I don't know, 4.something billion years to work that out. Now we've worked it out, and Charles Darwin opened the Pandora's box on that one, and Francis Bacon opened up the idea on that one. So now it's for us to, okay, we know that now, take charge and move on. And absolutely, nature has been around this hairy bends for a long time before we were around. So so it's got some things like these plants you're talking about to counter some of these natural phenomena that's faced in the past. It's been here, it's done that. So if you consider biology as a technology, biohacking, biological technology, then maybe there's a lot to learn from nature. So thank you so much for coming on. I think that's a really good place to yeah, and absolutely, me too. And look, we are organizing. David Ulishvili, he's about to graduate environmental science, and John Kokesh, he's a candidate for the USGP, and they want to come on because John Kokesh is not Kokesh, but Kurtz, sorry, and he's one of the chief environmental advisors for a governor over there in his state in America. So he's really involved in the environment, and those two really want to talk. So absolutely. So thank you so much for coming on, Meow.
Thank you. Cheers.
Stay out of jail.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
No, but your court case ended up working out well. She said you were a man of good character, and you threw it out.
That's it. That was good. It was good.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on Detonation. All more coming all your way all this week.